organizations and, providing this funding for artists. What for you is the telltale sign of a really well-written grant proposal, or on the other end of the spectrum, what's the telltale sign of an unsatisfactory grant proposal?
Yeah, those are great questions. And some of them would seem pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people don't read the guidelines, eligibility guidelines. And that's the first thing. Really familiarize yourself with what the eligibility guidelines are and what the goals of the grant are. A lot of times what you'll get is people who understand what their goal, why they want the grant, so they'll communicate that. But what they won't communicate is why this should matter to the funders, or why this should matter to the organization that is the go-between or that is doing the funding. So, for example, here's a good example. So there's going to be a big difference in the language and what a grant, what a proposal should include based on who the audience is. So if you're asking for money paid as a grant from a city, like it's a unique grant that's like for a location, like this is about, this is for Idaho, and community of Idaho is offering this grant program to enhance, to bring music, and we want to see more musicians. And so on the surface, it seems like what they're trying to do is support art, but what they're also trying to do likely is increase property values. They're also probably trying to make a case for more funding, or they're trying to help maybe a historically underserved area sort of get revitalized. Maybe there's a revitalization aspect to it. Maybe it's a community redevelopment thing. So if that's the case, you wouldn't just say, well, I really want to make this CD because it's my new CD and I wrote it, and this is a really cool CD project and I want to perform it in your area. But maybe there's another aspect to it where you're saying, well, there's a project we want to do that is about, and obviously I know that this is a very specific community, but I'm just sort of spitballing, but there's a project we want to do about education, and doing this will bring in X amount of kids, which will bring in parents. And historically the kids are on the street around this time. There's not a lot. We have 80% of latchkey kids who come home to no parents. So we want to provide this program, and we want to use arts to do it because there's a lot of kids in this area who aren't aren't geared towards sports, and that's where most of the kids find their way out of this particular situation. We want to provide another way so that we can help that. In addition, we can keep crime down and be able to put that data in there. So that takes a little bit more research. And honestly, if you're applying for something for composition or for arranging, perhaps you wouldn't have to go that far. But for example, in the creative residency program that we have up to $40,000 for projects, what you're going to find is that if you just say, hey, listen, I really need this $40,000 to record my new CD. Well, why would that be a good investment on behalf of the funders unless that CD has something else to it? So if that CD is also about bringing communities together, or that album is also a byproduct of a larger project. So I really want to make, for example, we really want to put together a real book of modern women composers that can, so in addition, we're going to have all these composers fly in. We're going to do it with an all-female jazz band from these different regions. That way they can represent those regions. They can bring this music back there. And at the end of this project, we're going to record a CD with some of this music. So then you're getting your CD out of it. You're getting it for you, but you're also understanding that the outcome of this is to build community, or it's to push the jazz field forward. So it's more than just, taking care of what you need taken care of, but really understand what the funders are looking for and make sure that your language is representative so that the people who are looking at that, which, believe it or not, are not always musicians, especially if they're local grant local grant offerings. They're not always composers, musicians, and people who are going to understand your language. So being able to speak in a way that the people might understand it. Okay, these are a bunch of real estate developers and politicians. So how are you going to communicate your idea while keeping it authentic, and at the same time make sure that those people understand the value of that in a way that they can understand? As far as unsatisfactory ones, I'm going to go again and say there's so many people who just don't read or absorb the guidelines, and who aren't, while you're writing it, have those guidelines there. Wait, is this something? Am I addressing this concern? Am I addressing this goal of the grant? And if I'm not, maybe it's not the right grant for you, or maybe at the best, it helps you ask questions about your project that you might not have asked before.
Thanks, Drew. Those are all great points. And, always referencing those guidelines. That's something when, read the question, very detailed, like really read the question so you really understand what it is they're asking. Nadje, yeah.
Yeah. Can I add to that? I think that's a very important point. I wish people did that with our grant as well. I've given an information session on how to apply for our grant because I noticed that people were struggling. I think we have things like a letter of intent and a budget. We require a bio and 3 recordings. So we suggest putting the strongest recording first. Because if you can imagine, if you're listening to 100 submissions and there's 3 tracks, your ear is going to get tired. So you just make sure that things really catch the ear of the grant panel immediately. Really, I feel like a strong application is addressing the who, what, where, when, but most in particular, why. Why do you want to do this project? Why is it, why is it meaning for you? Why is it meaning for the larger community? So I feel like if people can really focus on the why, I feel like in my career I've applied for many grants that I never got, but the process of thinking about why I wanted to do a grant was really incredibly helpful. So that's sort of something that I encourage everybody to do.
And I'll piggyback on that by saying, don't also at the same time feel like you've got to have a PhD and a grant writer. I have seen grant proposals that have very simple language that even, you want to try your best not to have grammatical errors. But I've had ones where, you can tell that this is not somebody who like has a PhD that's writing it, and they've still received the grant funding because they were in alignment with the funders. They were meeting the goals of the grant, and they themselves were clearly stating exactly what they wanted to do, why they wanted to do it, and who their audience was. So I also just want to reassure people, like, don't feel like if you don't have $3,000 to hire a grant writer that you're not in the running, because you absolutely are. I've seen it happen many, many times. And to piggyback on Drew's comment here, don't drop a whole concert and expect a panel to listen. Your work samples are so important. And I've heard live recordings that were even like on an iPhone that you could still tell that the person had a lot of talent. Take that 5 minutes to edit the talking and edit the audience moving around in the beginning, and just have your video clip starting where the music starts. Because if I've got to sit there and skip through, I'm getting frustrated when I have 100 applications or more to go through. So those would be my good and bad tips.
Those are all great. When somebody